Hello, everybody. How's it going? It's me, Krendor, and welcome back to Krendor Talks in front of a shitty green screen. Today, we're talking about Warhammer 40k 10th edition and my thoughts and opinions after playing my first game yesterday. I played a 2v2. I was Necrons with Thousand Suns, and we played against Orcs and World Eaters. So, an interesting matchup, and it was a lot of fun. It's what I wanted 40k to feel like, is what I kept thinking to myself. So just to kind of reiterate where I'm coming from here, I'm not like a 40k professional. In fact, I never really intended to play 40k. I intended to play Age of Sigmar, Warhammer Fantasy, like that was me, right? I got into Warhammer Fantasy when I was like 12, 13, back like 20 years ago, and then I got back into Warhammer because of nostalgia like 4 years ago. In fact, almost exactly 4 years ago. And I was like, I'm going to build some lizard men. And then before you knew it, I have way too many armies, and I have an entire room filled with plastic. So it's become an addiction, but like a fun meditative addiction, you know? And I've really enjoyed playing the game. So Age of Sigmar, I've probably played like over 100 games of Age of Sigmar. That's just, I've really enjoyed it. You know, I learned in 2nd edition, and then 3rd edition came around. I've played a ton of 3rd edition. I've loved it. So 40k, about a year ago, or what, maybe it was 2 years ago. Well, whenever the Winter Olympics happened from now, I think that was that last year or the other year. I think it might have been last year. Whatever. So we played for. My friends wanted to play Warhammer 40k, and I was like, you know what? I'd be willing to give it a shot, right? But the only things I liked were Xenos armies. I don't like humans. I don't like Space Marines. I'm not even a big space person. But I was like, you know what? I like Necrons. I think they're cool. I like orcs because they're orcs, and I like Tyranids because I played Zerg in StarCraft, and they're literally what Zerg is based off of. So I was like, those are my three, right? And so after playing Warhammer 40k 9th edition, there was just so much, and this is one of the biggest complaints, you know, you hear all the time. It's just the rules bloat, like everything. There's so much to learn, and this is coming from somebody who plays like Warhammer Age of Sigmar a lot. Right? So I know a lot of the basic stuff, like to hit, to wound, save rolls, like command abilities, like all these different things, moving them around the board. So like there are differences, but there's a lot of similarities between the two as well. So it's a lot easier to pick up and learn when you already have this base understanding of kind of how to play tabletop Warhammer, right? And so even somebody coming from that background, learning 40k 9th edition was like like there's just so much. Like my biggest issues were the scoring. It just felt like so much for scoring, which I've realized now feels a lot better. The scoring in 10th edition, I think they went from 3 down to 2 secondary, not objective, but like missions or whatever. Or maybe it is objectives, whatever. But it feels a lot better, at least for me. Then there was building a list. Building a list was one of the most annoying parts, because I was like, I want to run Silent King, or I want to run my Stomp, and they're like, you have to put it in a Titanic detachment, and then you have to have another detachment, and then this, and I was just like, I just want to build shit. And thank God, now this edition, they're like, just throw your shit into a list. And there you go, you can play with it. Like, that's all I want. I feel like that's what so many people wanted, and there's going to be people that complain, but people will complain about everything. I know in even one of my things, someone was like, detachments aren't even that hard to understand. Well, yeah, probably because you've been using them for forever, and you know how to do it. Once you know how to do something, you play with it over and over and over, then it becomes easy because you understand it. But that doesn't mean the barrier to entry should be extremely difficult and unnecessary. It just felt unnecessary. I think it was my biggest issue, right? It was just like, why am I even doing this? And I would put it into the app, and then the app's like, here's your command points. And everyone's like, oh, that's not the right amount of command points. I'm like, even the app can't do it. Even the app can't figure it out. Okay, so it was just confusing for no reason. So that was another thing. Then all the stratagems, which, you know, that's just, everyone always mentions that. So many stratagems. It was just constant rules bloat. And you had the worst part about having so many stratagems isn't trying to know all your stratagems. It's trying to know all your opponent's stratagems. And that's one of the nicest parts about Age of Sigmar, is that they've kind of gone to that generic command ability system where everybody can all out attack, everybody can all out defense, everybody can redeploy, everybody can do all these things, right? And certain armies have their own kind of unique command abilities, but it's very rare now. And a lot of the times, those abilities are tied in to the generic ones everybody knows, right? So, like, for example, Skinks. Skinks have the ability to roll 2 dice when they redeploy and pick one of them. So it's easy to say, oh, you know, redeploy? Well, Skinks can do a thing that revolves around redeploy where I roll 2 dice. People like, oh, okay, so it's like a buffed up one. Or like all-out attack also gives you, you know, a bonus attack. So you're getting +1 hit and a bonus attack. People like, oh, okay. So it becomes easier to understand from a learning perspective, and it, you know, it's simplified, but it's still a complex situation. You have to know when to use those things in the right situations in order to, you know, make the best of your situation, right? And to be tactical and strategic, which is the whole point of the game, right? So that was, and when you have so many stratagems, unless you're like a super nerd or you're playing in like tournaments, you're probably not going to know every stratagem. And it's just, it sets up gotcha moments where you're like, I'm going to go over here. And then someone's like, whoa, activate my stratagem, gotcha, you're dead. It's like, oh boy, I'm glad I took out 2 hours of my day to have that happen. Well, time to go. Right? Like, it's not fun. And so I think they realized that. They definitely did. And stratagems last night when I was playing, it was just great. Like, I think Necrons had like 10 stratagems or something. I don't remember how many, but it was a lot less. And they felt very situational, and everything felt very thematic. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've enjoyed with Warhammer lately is the amount of thematicism that they've put into the game. And this is Age of Sigmar included. It feels like when I see a unit, I can figure out what that unit is trying to do, right? Like if I see a big monster with a giant hammer, I'm like, man, that thing probably hits pretty hard with a giant hammer, right? If I see some magical dude like Lord Kroak sitting on a throne, there's like magic like floating above him. It's like, wow, that dude probably is pretty good at casting spells, right? And I feel like that's kind of what that's what they've been trying to go for with a lot of stuff, is being able to see something on the table and be like, oh, I can kind of figure out what that does. And I think with the new stratagems, it almost feels like they're kind of tied into that in a way. So for example, Necrons, I was playing 2 blocks of 20 Necron warriors, and a reanimator and an overlord was in one. See, it's essentially like if you don't wipe out the Necron warrior block, they're gonna come back. It's almost like Ossiarch Bone Reapers, or you know, just annoying death armies. That's pretty much what it is. And so there was one part where the orc player killed like 10 of my Necron warriors, and I popped my command or my stratagem, and the stratagem is like right after you are attacked, you can activate your reanimation protocol. So it's, you know, it's a stratagem where it's not really a gotcha, but it's more like oh, you were expecting this thing to happen because these guys do reanimate, and it just so happens they reanimate now because I can spend a command point. So it's, I think, plus this is only like one of their like very limited stratagems. So after a while, you learn like, oh, okay. But there's so many ways to reanimate them and everything. It's just, my whole point here is that I feel like the stratagems themselves feel more thematic, right? I think that's my point. And I feel like in the beginning of the edition, everything's going to be very almost gotcha in a way, unless you look over everything, because everybody's going to be learning. Everybody's going to be like, oh, I can't believe that thing does that. But after, you know, a few games or playing against a lot of different armies, you'll be like, oh, okay, I kind of know what they do still. So it just feels great. You know, the like, again, like the reanimator. The reanimator helps you reanimate. That's what it does. It's fantastic. Like, cool. It makes sense. You know, and all the keywords and everything. It's just everything I think feels a lot better in those terms. So that leads me to kind of my last point I wanted to get at, which is the actual War Scroll data cards or index cards, whatever they are, right? And I think they are now so much easier to read in comparison to the old ones. It's night and day. It's so nice. It's so nice just having everything right there, you know, looking at it and being like, oh, I know what my ranged weapons are and the strength and the toughness and everything right there. And then it's all right there. There's still a little bit of like having to figure out some stuff, but I think that's just the complexities of a game like 40K. where it's even a little more crazy than Age of Sigmar. Where Age of Sigmar, for example, you have all your weapons and your melee profiles and range, whatever, and you can attack with all of those, right? So it's like I have all my melee weapons, I attack with all of them. While 40k kind of messed me up a bit because there's always like you have like 5 weapons, but you only get to pick like 2 of them, and you have to like allocate your unless there's an extra attacks. And I was just like, what? But now it seems like they've kind of limited the melee profiles a bit, allowing you to have an easier time of figuring out your melee attacks, which has been nice. And it's also nice because a lot of times they'll have the melee profile and the extra attacks there. So you're like, oh, there it is. Or a lot of times they'll show like the 2 melee profiles have the little arrow. Like you can do the sweeping attack or like the strike attack. And you're like, oh, okay. So I just pick one of those. It's just, everything just feels easier to read and easier to understand. And I think when you have all these things that I've just mentioned, right? You have all this stuff. You trim off the fat. You get rid of the bloat. It creates a better gameplay experience because everybody doesn't have to think about what's going on and what stratagem to use and looking through the book and being like, wait, what does my unit do? What did I buy? What gun does this guy have? How do I use this melee thing? What scoring? Wait, which objective? Like, there's just so much shit to remember. And you're like, blah. And now it just feels like you can put your stuff down and just play the game. And I think that's what they've wanted. I think that's what they've done. It just feels like now everything feels so much smoother. It feels like you just put your stuff down. You're like, this is what I brought. This is what I want to run. And you just play the game. And you have fun. And that's it. And obviously there's still going to be meta builds. There's still going to be, people sweating and, tournament level crazy shit people do. But like, it's night and day compared to 9th edition is what I felt from playing that game. It almost feels like baseball when baseball just put in the pitch clock and it just feels sped up and it just feels better. That's what it feels like. It feels like they just they got rid of some unnecessary stuff. So that's how I feel so far. Maybe my opinions will change as we keep going, or once codexes come out and they add more stuff. Who knows? Maybe they'll just start adding more stuff, and then you're like, oh god, I gotta remember all this. But we'll see. But so far, I think it's going in the right direction. This is the most fun I had playing 40k, and I'm looking forward to playing more. So let me know down in the comments section below what you think, if you've played a game or what you're looking forward to, or just any thoughts and opinions you might have. So thank you for listening to me rant, and I'll see you next time. Okay? Okay. See ya.